Your words, not mine. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all of our hearts, may that be acceptable in your sight, for you are our rock and redeemer. Amen. Halford Lucock, in his work Unfinished Business, tells the story of a little town called Flagstaff in the state of Maine. Way back in the 1940s, the residents decided to build a large hydroelectric dam in the area. But as a consequence, the entire town of Flagstaff was going to be flooded. It was going to be completely underwater. Now, this was all planned ahead of time, and the residents were given compensation, and they were relocated before the floodwaters came. But what's fascinating about the story of Flagstaff is what happened from the moment that the flooding was announced to the moment that the flood actually came. You see, all improvements, all repairs in the entire town were stopped. What's the use of painting a house or mowing your lawn if it's all going to be underwater in 6 months? In fact, why repair anything in the entire town if it's going to be wiped out? And so week by week, the entire town fell apart. It became more and more bedraggled and woe-begone. It was really kind of depressing. By the end, 6 months later, it looked like it had been abandoned for decades. It was a really depressing sight, an entire town destroyed before it was destroyed. The rationale said, when there is no faith in the future, there is no power in the present. When we don't believe that anything good is coming tomorrow, we give up today. Today is the start of a brand new sermon series called Access. For the next couple of weeks, we are going to spend some time looking at the picture and the pieces of the Christmas story, all while asking the question, who is welcome? Who has access to Jesus? Who has the ability to come before God, to kneel before the baby in the manger or the king hanging on the cross? Who is worthy? Who does God want? And we're going to spend some time talking about people who are unprepared, people who are misunderstood, the sick, the naked, the poor, the rich, the wealthy, the brilliant, the idiots, the criminals. And we are going to search the scriptures for an invitation for each type of person. And what I'm really excited to show you is that when God welcomes all these types of people, God is welcoming a part of us. When God reaches out to people who are unprepared, He is reaching out to us in those moments when we are unprepared or stressed, or maybe life is a little bit chaotic. When God reaches out to criminals or people who are misunderstood, He is reaching us in those moments when we mess up and we are being misunderstood. When God welcomes the broken of the world, it is a mirror reflection of God welcoming the pieces of us that are broken. Who has access? Who are the VIPs of God's story? And so we get into our story in the first chapter of Luke. I got water all over my bone. And so we're going to spend all our time in Luke chapter 1 today. We're going to do Matthew 25 next week. But this story comes right before Jesus was born. And the story is about John the Baptist's parents. It's all about his parents. And so we open up in verse 5. And there's this guy, Zechariah. And he's a priest in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. And his name is Zechariah. And he's married to a woman named Elizabeth. And so it says in verse 7, it says, but they had no children because Elizabeth was barren and both were getting on in years. Now, getting on in years, of course, is the politically correct way to say they're old, right? They're getting old. They're getting to that age where babies really aren't possible anymore, and they wanted kids. Earlier it said that they've been praying for children, but it's starting to look like they're not going to get, that God is not going to answer that prayer. God's answer is going to be no. But then it keeps going in verse 8. It says, once when he was serving as a priest before God and his section was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter into the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. And we got to back up just a little bit so we can understand what's going on there. Making a mess. So in the temple, in Jerusalem, up front, in the Jewish religion, there was a room. And it was called the Holy of Holies, right, in the temple. And this room was so sacred. It was so important that only one man was ever allowed to go back there. One man, and it was very exclusive. It was a high priest who was chosen at random in a rotation. Only one man was allowed back there. It was very exclusive. It was very intimidating. In fact, there were even some who believed that if you went in there on the wrong day, or if you did it in the wrong day, you might even be struck dead by the presence of God in that room. The Old Testament belief in God left people terrified of who God was. In the Holy of Holies, that's where the presence of God dwelled. And there was this big curtain, like a floor-to-ceiling curtain covering that room. And that's how they understood God. He was in this room. He was separate and away from them. That's where he dwelled. And there was a curtain separating humanity from the raw and terrifying power of the Almighty. And so that's what goes on. That's what's going on here. Zechariah has been chosen to be the guy who goes into the Holy of Holies. And he goes in there. And he goes into this Holy of Holies. Now, I don't know about you, but if I'm the priest who has to go into God's super secret special room, I'm going to be very careful. I have to make sure everything goes perfect. And then in verse 11, it says, "Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. And when Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him." Okay, now just picture this, okay? You are hanging out in the place where everything has to go perfect, and the raw, unfettered power of God is all around you, and you're like tipping-toeing around, trying to be careful, and then bam, there's an angel who just shows up out of nowhere right next to the incense. I don't know about you, I would freak right out. "Oh, dude, what are you doing to me?" Right? Actually, if I saw an angel, I'd be like, "I'm dead." Shoot, I did it wrong. Something went wrong. I'm dead. Right? Why is there an angel? And yet, the angel has good news for him. I think it's very reasonable that Zechariah was terrified. But then the angel has good news to him. He says, your prayers have been answered. Your wife is going to get pregnant. You will have joy and gladness. And in verse 16, the angel starts telling Zechariah about his son. He says, "You're going to have a little boy. And here's what he's going to do. He's going to be this amazing guy." It says in verse 16, it says, He will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. With the spirit and power of Elijah, he will go before him to turn hearts of parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord. So basically, the angel is telling Zechariah, your kid is going to be awesome, right? Your child is going to be John the Baptist. He's going to be a really big deal. And what does Zechariah say in response? But Zechariah said to the angel, "How will I know that this is so? For I am an old man, and my wife is getting on in years." Which we remember is the politically correct... Never mind. The angel just said that your child, your son, is going to turn people's hearts to their children. He's going to turn disobedient people to the wisdom of the righteous. He's going to make people ready for God. And all Zechariah can say is, "Yeah, but my wife is really old." Oh. And then, so my favorite, the angel told Zechariah, this is an answer to your prayer, but Zechariah couldn't believe it, which tells us that Zechariah was praying for something that he never actually thought he would get. He was asking for this prayer, but he didn't actually believe that God would help him. He was not prepared for God to say yes to him. And so my favorite part of the story, the angel comes up with a great punishment. And in verse 19 it says, "The angel replied, I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, which will be fulfilled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak until the day these things occur." Now, do you notice that the angel does not answer Zechariah's question? Zechariah is like, "How are you going to do this? I'm really old. My wife's old. How is this possible?" And the angel just looks at him and says, "I'm Gabriel, fool. I'm Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God. You don't have to worry about the how. God's going to handle that." But then and so Zechariah is struck mute. He can't talk at all. The scriptures say that he comes stumbling out of the Holy of Holies, and he's waving his arms and he's motioning, but he cannot speak a word. So then we fast forward like 30 verses, and there's a lot of stuff in there about, Mary and Jesus and pregnant Mary visiting pregnant Elizabeth, and they're all just hanging out in a little pregnant party. But then we get up to Zechariah in verse 59. And it says, On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to name him Zechariah after his father. But his mother said, no, he is to be called John. And then they said to her, none of your relatives have this name. Then they began motioning to his father to find out what name he wanted to give him, and he asked for a writing tablet because he can't talk. He asked for a writing tablet, and he wrote, his name is John. And all of them were amazed, and immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue was freed, and he began to speak, praising God. So first, Elizabeth names the child, which is unusual. That was rare at this time. Mom didn't usually get to name the kid. Usually that was Dad's job. And then she goes with the name outside the family, which is even more rare. And when Zechariah agrees, and only when he agrees with his wife, is he able to speak again. Now, I'm just a simple pastor trying to figure out my Bible and explain it to you all. But I think maybe we have a biblical precedent for husbands to shut up during pregnancy if they ever want to speak again. Maybe I'm wrong. Little side note, because I don't want you to miss it. There's this kind of a fun fact. The angel told Zechariah, you're going to name him John. But Zechariah was struck mute before he left the room. Elizabeth came up with the name John all by herself. He couldn't have told her what to do. This was Elizabeth's, initiative. See, the good news this morning, and actually the good news of the entire Christmas story, is that God is coming. You see, back then they had this separate room, the Holy of Holies, and God was in there and we were out there separate and apart. But with the birth, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, there is no more Holy of Holies. There's no, God's not like hanging out over there by that table or over there or in the back or something. God is here. God is everywhere. God is coming. God is with us. The beauty of the Christmas story is that it is the beginning of hope. It is the beginning of the end, literally of ripping down the veil and having nothing to separate humanity and God ever again. God is coming. Jesus, the baby, is coming. And so we can throw wide the doors of God's love. The baby is coming. The baby in the manger hands out VIP tickets to all of humanity. God is coming. There is no separation. There is no Holy of Holies anymore. The world is God's Holy of Holies now. But here's the thing, what that really means, the reason that is good news is that with God comes hope. With God comes hope. God is coming, which means that hope is coming. Zechariah was unprepared because he had no hope. He didn't actually believe that God would help him. And so he was shocked and confused when God answered his prayer. He was unprepared for the awesome that is the presence of God. And so what we find in the story of Zechariah is that preparation is tied in with our hope. Let me see if I can show you what I mean. A long time ago, Parade magazine did a piece on a guy named Eugene Land. Maybe you've heard this story of Eugene Land. It's a true story. It is such a prominent story that actually a TV show called The Office did a little spoof on it. They kind of like made fun of it. But the real guy, Eugene Land, he was a self-made millionaire. And one day he went to speak to a class of 59 sixth graders. There were 59 students in the room in a little class in East Harlem. And he looked at this class and he wondered, what could I say to inspire these kids? What could I say to inspire them? And so the group of students was mostly black and Puerto Rican children, and statistics said that in this area of East Harlem in New York, most of them were going to drop out before they got to the end of high school. And so he gets up in front of the kids and he's wondering, how can I even get them to look at me, much less inspire them? And so he kind of tore up his notes on the spot, and he decided just to speak from his heart. He said, here's the deal. Stay in school, and if you finish high school, I will pay for your college education. He made a pledge to 59 sixth graders. He said, you make it through high school, I will put you through college. Now, dropout rates in this area were incredibly high. I mean, more than 50% were losing. But for the first time in their lives, these kids had hope. One of the students was quoted in the article. He said, I had something to look forward to, something waiting for me. It was a golden feeling. nearly 90% of that class graduated from high school. Because if you have hope in a better tomorrow, you have action. It changes how you live today. Think about that town in Flagstaff that was flooded. When you have no hope for tomorrow, you have no action today. Now bring it into your life. Are we unprepared to deal with the problems of our world because we don't believe? We don't actually hope for a real victory. Have we given up today because we don't believe we can win tomorrow? The story of Zechariah teaches us two big things. Number one, hang on to your hope. God is coming. Hope is coming into the world. The baby in the manger is the beginning of the story of salvation, literally the foundation that leads to saving the entire world. Hope is coming. The baby comes and welcomes those who are unprepared. Jesus welcomes those who have lost hope. Have you ever felt that way? You ever just been overwhelmed, unprepared, just maybe starting to give up hope? Maybe you've been looking at the economy in the area with GM's big announcement, and you're watching all those jobs leave town, and you're just tired, so tired of the fight. Or maybe you're looking at the politics of this country, at the cutthroat red versus blue and blue versus red, the dialogue and the way we treat each other, and you're just terrified and exhausted and starting to give up. Or maybe you're looking at your family, your marriage, your kids, your job, and you just don't see how it could ever get better. You don't see the path where it gets better. You know what? It's okay to feel that way because that's real and that's raw. You know, it is okay to sit in the darkness, to sit in the silence like Zechariah did, because that is the moment when the light of God has the most power in your life. So hang on to your hope. The baby in the manger, the Lord of all creation, is coming. He turns to the unprepared. He turns to the hopeless of our world, and he offers a VIP ticket. He takes us in his arms, and he whispers, "Let me tear down the veil. Let me step into your world." Zechariah was not ready for his son. He was not ready for John to come into his life. But you know what? John the Baptist's ministry was all about preparing people, getting people ready, giving them hope that tomorrow might be better, to realize that the struggles of today do not get the last word, to prepare the way to the Lord. So hang on to your hope, because God is coming. Second, when you have your hope, when you keep a tight grip on the promise that God is coming, the second step is to prepare with expectation. God welcomes the unprepared. He welcomes those who are, they're not ready, they don't have hope. But God doesn't leave us that way. God gives us hope. He prepares the unprepared. He reaches into our lives and gets us ready for something better than the misery of today. Prepare with expectation. Remember those kids in Harlem? They knew that they could go to college if they could just finish high school. So 90% of them rose to the challenge in a world where more than 50% were dropping out. And our promise is even better. If you can make it through the next thing, if you can make whatever obstacles going on in your life, if you can make it through the next step, God is coming. So prepare with expectation. Put your life together with the expectation that God is going to show up and do great things in your world. It may not be what you expect. It may not be when you expect it, but God is coming. And he's got a VIP ticket for you. Will you be ready? The baby in the manger kind of changed everything, didn't he? I mean, it used to be so exclusive. One guy could go back into that special room, the Holy of Holies, on a certain day and only in a special way, like the priest Zechariah, to be in the presence of God. And then Jesus shows up. This baby, ready or not, he's here for everyone. God welcomes the unprepared in each of us. In the moments when we are not ready, when we're stressed and we're overwhelmed and we have so much to do, even when we're starting to be hopeless and we're starting to give up, God sends us that little reminder, the message of John the Baptist and his dad Zechariah. God is coming. God is coming. Hope is coming. And so I'll leave you with this. How does your vision of tomorrow affect the way you are living your life today? Do you have hope that tomorrow could be better? And if you do, are there people in your life who have no hope for tomorrow? Are there people that you know and they're starting to give up today because they just don't believe that tomorrow could be better? And what could you do to give them access to that hope? What could you do to show them the good news that comes with the birth of Jesus? The Christmas story gives us access so that the unprepared can step into the presence of God, find that hope, and then never be the same again. Amen. I'm going to ask the worship team to come forward for our final song.